I'm I. Fernandez. I'm the Executive Director of the National Center for Victims of Crime, and thank you for joining us on our webinar this afternoon. We're going to be looking to talk about, when we say criminal justice reform, what does that really mean for victims? Several years back, in a room with the MacArthur Foundation where they had brought together the criminal justice field to talk to us about their justice challenge. We approached the MacArthur Foundation and said, you really need to have the perspective of victims when you talk about criminal justice reform, even when you're talking about jails. And they told, I think they're right, and we'd like you to come in as an ally and help us figure out what it means to be part of a reform if you're part of the victims movement. This afternoon, we are going to be hearing from Soledad McGrath, the Program Officer for Justice Reform from MacArthur Foundation, Kramer, the Chief from Pima County Attorney's Office, Robert Person, the Director of the St. Louis County Department of Justice Services, and all his colleague, Amy Zunick from the St. Louis Department of Justice Services. I'd like to turn it over to Soledad McGrath to tell us a little bit about the MacArthur Safety and Justice Reform campaign.
I'm delighted to be here today on behalf of the Foundation to provide a very brief overview of the Safety and Justice Challenge so that you have plenty of time to hear from Amelia and Herb. As you may all be aware, the Foundation has long been in the justice space through our support of international human rights and nearly 20 years investing in juvenile justice reform efforts. As we began exploring entering the criminal justice field, we decided to focus on local criminal justice systems because we were struck by the sheer numbers. Only 12 million local jail admissions every year, almost 20 times the number of prison admissions. And not only were we struck by the sheer numbers of individuals being churned through the system and the high moral cost, but of course the fiscal costs are staggering as well. And no denying that there are disparities in how people of color are treated by the system. So we knew that reducing racial and ethnic disparities in local jails would be a core focus of our work. Now, it certainly recognizes that jails serve a legitimate purpose to hold individuals who are a flight risk and are a danger to society. But what we found was that jails too often serve as warehouses for those too poor to post bail, nonviolent offenders, or people with mental illnesses. And so the Foundation in February of 2015 launched the Safety and Justice Challenge, which is our initiative to reduce over-incarceration by changing the way America thinks about and uses jails. We committed an initial $100 million investment over 5 years in systemic local justice systems reform as a means of reducing over-incarceration in America, with a particular focus on addressing disproportionate impact on low-income individuals and communities of color. We certainly know that there are promising strategies already out there to reduce the use of jails, to improve public safety and save money at the same time. I know that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but we certainly don't presume to have all the answers. You can see here that there are already strategies in play in multiple communities that are engaging in justice reform, and many of the jurisdictions that are working with us have been involved in reform efforts for many years before undertaking the Safety and Justice Challenge. So we know that there are promising practices out there, but we're not prescribing specific solutions. Instead, we're leaving, and we have left, the planning and the consideration and the development of solutions to the jurisdictions that are participating in the challenge. And you'll hear more specifics about that from Amelia in just a bit. We're particularly excited because we believe that this is a field where there is room to innovate. We hope that with our direct support in investment in sites, we'll be encouraged to push the envelope and to raise the bar and experiment and push for new and innovative solutions. And it's really encouraging to see that that's already starting to come to fruition. The jurisdictions that are participating in the Safety and Justice Challenge focused on 7 core decision points that you can see here on your screen. implementation plans to reduce their local jail incarceration rates developed, focused, and anchored on these 7 decision points. Certainly, the jurisdictions are not all working on each of these decision points through a very intensive planning process. They identified where in their system they would put their energy and efforts into strategizing to reduce their local level incarceration. We started out with a pool of 191 jurisdictions to choose from through an open a request for proposals back in February of 2015, and as you can imagine, it was a very, very difficult choice to get down to 20 jurisdictions that would become part of the initial cohort of the Safety and Justice Challenge. We were certainly overwhelmed and really pleased and tickled to see so much enthusiasm across the country for this kind of reform effort. The range that it covered and spanned the whole country. But we ultimately did have to make a choice, and we selected our 20 network sites. From 20, we selected an additional 10 to receive deep support, and these are what we call our core sites. Pima and St. Louis are 2 of our core sites. Jurisdictions really presented us with the most ambitious and innovative plans to reduce their local level incarceration rates and also to reduce racial and ethnic disparities. Our goal is ultimately to have national impact, and we can't do that necessarily with 20 jurisdictions as hard as they are working. Today, the network has expanded to 40 jurisdictions with the addition of 20 sites that we call our Innovation Fund sites. So we have the 20 initial cohort, and then our 20 Innovation Fund sites. These additional 20 sites were announced in February of 2017. And with the addition of these jurisdictions is to expand the challenges reach into new states, to deepen our work across the country. And as you would be able to see, I can't show you here, but if you go to safetyandjusticechallenge.org, you can see summaries of and descriptions of the jurisdictions that are participating both at the core partner and innovation fund site level. And that it's a diverse group in size, in geography, and in focus areas. I mentioned, the network of 20 jurisdictions and now 40 jurisdictions is at the core, but our goal is ultimately to achieve national impact. And we are doing that because through a multifaceted grant-making strategy that includes the network as its core, amplification, which is really a robust communication strategy to help amplify the work that is happening on the ground, and that is done partly through traditional communications grants and partnerships with organizations like Berlin Rosen and M&R Strategic Strategies, but it's also through the work of our strategic allies. I'm very pleased that the National Center for Victims of Crime is one of those strategic allies. And ultimately, also, we are supporting research development because we know that there are a lot of gaps in the research. We want to be able to learn from the work that our sites are doing, but also to support the work that they are doing and support the field with developing robust body of research that we will share with the field as it is developed. The work has progressed since 2015. We have an expanded base of partners now for this phase of the work. And this is just a sampling of some of the partners that are involved. You can see here I have strategic allies because there are national, professional, policy, and practitioner membership organizations that are working with us to highlight the work of the sites, to translate the work that is happening on the ground to their constituency groups, to integrate key voices into the justice reform efforts, such as what CVC is doing, really integrating the diverse voice of the victims community into our reform efforts. And then you see some of our partners on the knowledge development side, some work that is happening now. We're very excited that we are going to be launching work with Harvard University through the development of a new executive session in the fall of 2017. So I just condensed in a very quick rundown this massive infrastructure that we have been growing to help support local justice systems reform. If you want to learn more about the initiative, please visit safetyandjusticechallenge.org, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the session.
Now we're going to hear from Amelia Kramer from Pima County. She's the Chief Deputy of the District Attorney's Office there. Amelia?
Good afternoon. I'll be with you. Just a little bit of information about the Pima County Attorney's Office. We're located in Tucson, Arizona. We are one of the 10 sites that is a core site. Population is a little over 1 million individuals who reside in the county. Pima County Attorney's Office has a little more than 100 attorneys. About 5 of them are prosecutors. We also provide civil legal advice to county government. We have a services division that is the victim services provider for the entire county. It's victim services for cases for 34 different police departments that bring us felony and misdemeanor cases. We have about 26 staff who are victim advocates, and we have more than 100 volunteers for victim advocates. They work 24/7 to crisis advocacy at crime scenes. They also provide court advocacy in terms of meeting with victims throughout the justice process and literally sitting with them in court with tissues and water. We have two courthouse dogs that provide services to victims of child sexual abuse. We also provide victim compensation to, and so we were pleased when involved in the Safety and Justice Challenge to be able to take into consideration the issues that affect victims throughout the criminal justice process. Just a story of a couple of examples about why we call this the Safety and Justice Challenge and why it's important to us as prosecutors to be involved in this justice reform effort. About a year and a half ago, during the same week period, I attended misdemeanor court in our Pima County Justice Court. It was a health court docket where a female defendant was brought in, then an inmate in the Pima County Jail, and we have one jail for both our Sheriff's Department and 5 police departments to bring all the inmates, all arrestees in our county. This went in jail for 45 days before her court hearing. She was severely mentally ill. She had been medicated and received minimum in the jail stabilization, but not progressive treatment and no liaison with outside service providers. She was on a warrant for having failed to appear in a misdemeanor case 2 years before. So there had been a warrant out for her arrest for 2 years, and she'd been picked up on that. The reason she had been in the jail for 45 days was there was a restoration to competency process, and she was awaiting her court hearing. When she came in, it was determined that the underlying misdemeanor offense that she had committed was stealing a candy bar. So what we offered was obviously to time served and to ask that she be given some mental health treatment, which is what the judge offered. That's a woman who spent 45 days in jail effectively for having stolen a candy bar 2 years earlier. The same week, there were who had law enforcement officer knock and announce at his front door. In response to that was to shoot a weapon at them through the door. None of them were killed, and they had bulletproof vests on. He got into the jail. But the pretrial judge imposed a bond amount of $150,000 cash. But he's a man, so he posted a bond, and he was out within 24 hours. So I think that both safety of the public would mitigate in favor of having that gentleman in jail pretrial, and justice would mitigate in favor of having that woman out of custody. And that's why we're involved in this important project. What we're doing in Pima County is to improve public safety, also lower jail costs by reducing the jail population, because what we found is about 80% of the jail inmates in the Pima County Jail are inmates, and a significant percentage of them, more than half, are on warrants for prior failures to appear. So if we engage in this safety and justice operation, we should be able to get some of those defendants out of jail, pre-trial, the conclusion of the case without any safety hazard to victims or the public. And want to prevent crime by reducing recidivism. We'd like to see services offered to inmates in the jail, particularly inmates like that mentally ill woman. We found in data collection that we have significant racial and ethnic disparities, particularly African Americans, a little bit for Hispanic individuals, as well as a slight amount for Native Americans, and we would like to rectify those disparities. Three major strategies in Pima County, the first of which is fully funded by the MacArthur Foundation grant, and court system innovations and treatment alternatives. And the first one has already been implemented. In our county justice court for misdemeanors, we already had implemented a pretrial risk screening for defendants booked into the county jail. We also had a pretrial risk screening for all felonies. 5 cities and towns in Pima County, including the city of Tucson, which makes the most arrests of any of the law enforcement agencies, there was pretrial screening for misdemeanors. And we commenced that pretrial screening on October 31st, 2016, so every single individual who's booked into the jail receives risk screening. And that screening is risk for danger to the community, but it's also risk for mental health issues as well as behavioral and substance abuse health issues. And before the initial appearance, which typically is within 12 hours of arrest, we initial appearances before a judge twice a day in the Pima County Jail. There's actually a courtroom in the jail and health services department, which is an arm of the court, conducts those screening and assessments before initial appearance to provide information to the judge, to the prosecutor, and to defense counsel in the needs of the defendant and the danger risk that they pose to the community. The defendants who are released from trial into the community have increased supervision by the pretrial services agency. They were able to use the MacArthur funding to hire additional staff, as well as to enhance electronic monitoring capability and telephonic communications and some other services, so that the pretrial services agency of our court is able to, first of all, connect up individuals who have behavioral health needs, services pending trial while they're out on trial release, and also to better monitor them and what they're up to. And then we have funding to provide training to our justice system stakeholders, which includes judges. We found that they're the most in need of training to understand these innovations and realize the fact that that woman who stole the candy bar may not pose a risk to the community, and maybe a higher bail was needed for a man who was shooting at law enforcement officers. Second strategy is not currently funded by the MacArthur Foundation. We are seeking, we're underspent on the first one, and we're seeking to transfer some funding for this, but we have reminders now for defendants who are out on pretrial release. We have automated phone calls, text, and email reminders. We have found that there's been an 80% increase in defendants appearing for subsequent court hearings when they receive these reminders. It's just like the dentist sends to us, reminding us that we have an appointment. It's easier for people who have a phone or a computer to get there once they've received the reminder. And then established multi-jurisdictional warrant resolution courts on evenings and weekends. Multi-jurisdictional, I mean, for misdemeanors, we have 6 misdemeanor jurisdictions in Pima County, not including our 2 tribal courts. So we have the City of Tucson, we have the County Consolidated Justice Courts, and then we have 4 other cities and towns. So what we've done is brought in judges from all of the jurisdictions into one building for hours, so that people do not have to miss work to come in and resolve their warrants. We've highly publicized information on Facebook, Twitter, in the newspaper, on TV, with posts and flyers around town, to churches, groups like the NAACP, the League of United Latin American Citizens, and other groups that have contact with the public who may have outstanding warrants, help them know that they're unlikely to be taken into custody if all they have is a misdemeanor warrant outstanding, and they can safely go up at the courthouse weeks and weekends to get their warrants resolved. If there's a victim case, what happens is when they come in, there's hearings set at least 5 days out. Arizona has what I think is probably the most extensive victims' rights law in the country. Our County Attorney Barbara Lawal was instrumental in getting both a constitutional amendment in our state and statutes adopted that provide extensive rights for victims, including 5 days notice of any court hearing. So if a defendant comes in to clean up a warrant on Saturday court, what's going to happen is the warrant may be quashed, but a court date will be set 5 business days later. The victim will be notified of that court date and provided an opportunity to appear and to be heard at that court date before the defendant's case can be resolved or moved forward. We are working with the 2 tribal nations that exist in Pima County. The Tohono tribe is massive, spans the U.S.-Mexico border, and the Pasquayaqui tribe is small in geographic area and is urban tribe, and we are working with those tribal courts to help have cases in Tucson, either in the Justice Court or the city in Tucson, to be able to get either by electronic appearance in person. And again, we're working to make sure that there's victim notification and the ability for victims to participate in all of those hearings. Our strategy relates to post-conviction alternatives to jail. So one of the things that we found is that we have a significant number of defendants who are on work release from jail, where they were spending 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 5 days a week out of custody and coming in to spend the night there and weekends. And so if there were truly a public safety hazard in them being out in the community, they probably shouldn't be out at all. But if there's not that big a public safety hazard, then perhaps they could be on electronic monitoring. Most of these are DUI offenders where there was no victim in connection with their case. And we have electronic monitoring that has a two-way radio attached, GPS tracking 24/7 with staff monitoring that, and also has a portable breathalyzer that students have to use. And so they can be tracked, they can be talked to if they're somewhere where they're not supposed to be, and scooped up at a moment's notice if they're not complying with their conditions of release. So we've expanded this without funding from the MacArthur Foundation, but as one of the strategies that we're providing in-kind contribution to the project. We also reduced the use of automatic probation holds to arrestees. It used to be if somebody who was out on probation having been convicted of a misdemeanor, for example, or low-level felony drug possession offense, commit a new offense, low-level offense, there was an automatic custodial arrest. It's being evaluated by the probation department on a case-by-case basis and by law enforcement. So if it's the type of thing where law enforcement would issue a paper citation rather than make a custodial arrest, they consult with the probation department and make a decision as to whether a custodial arrest is needed or whether the paper citation for the new offense will be sufficient. And then we've expanded the use of summons in lieu of arrest warrants when probation is being revoked. So there are certain defendants who are willing to show up for court hearings, for probation hearings without having to come into custody pending those hearings, which we usually set 30 to 45 days out, the probation department time to put together a report. So significantly reduces the jail population as well. And finally, this was one of our 3 primary strategies, but we felt it was important to have community engagement. And so we established a community collaborative. There was an application process. We had 75 applicants for about 22 spots on the collaborative. And we are, Collaborative is sponsoring a leadership development program for formerly incarcerated individuals. We're also conducting a research project with the University of Arizona here in Tucson with former defendants and inmates, as well as current defendants and inmates, to find out particularly why we think there may be some of these racial and ethnic disparities. Finally, we're going to have a conference in May on decriminalizing mental illness, because our former sheriff who did this project with us said, our jail, our local jail, is the biggest mental health facility in southern Arizona. Here's a list of folks that are involved in our community collaborative. The ones in purple are ones that provide victim services. So you can see we have an agency called Emerge on the right-hand column, the third agency down. That is our domestic violence service provider. They provide a hotline 24/7. They take cases involving high lethality domestic violence incidents, whether felonies or misdemeanors, and prioritize them. They have opportunities, counseling, and other services for victims of domestic violence and children of victims of intimate partner violence, and they are one of the primary partners in this collaborative. Service providers that provide services both to defendants as to victims. You can see that we have the NAACP, which obviously is an organization dedicated to justice and equality for African Americans, an organization that focuses both on defense rights but also on victims' rights. We have medical and mental health service providers, the Interdenominational Ministers Alliance, our Behavioral Health Authority that provides connections to medical services as well as behavioral health services both for victims and defendants. And then, of course, our office, the Pima County Attorney's Office, which has those victim services that I previously described. So had these victim services agencies involved from the beginning and through the collaborative, as well as our office being one of the primary core entities involved in this project from day one. And community collaborative organizations have given a lot of important feedback. We also have, having services available for defendants who are released from the jail, which are very expansive in Arizona. We surprisingly for Arizona, a Medicaid expansion state. That means anybody who's 150% of poverty level is eligible for Medicaid. In Arizona, it's known as the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, or ACCESS, and the county has a regional behavioral health authority, or RBA, that enrolls patients in care. So what we have found is that 99% of criminal defendants are eligible for ACCESS, and some of our victims as well are eligible for ACCESS enrollment. And SECO, the Regional Behavioral Health Authority Corporation, has been involved in assisting those folks in getting enrolled in ACCESS eligibility. We are unique, I think, among the participating MacArthur sites in that we have sufficient beds available for services for those who need residents for drug addiction, need mental health treatment. We have a brand new crisis response center and hospital for the mentally ill in Pima County. And so there are beds available. The biggest issue we face is connectivity, making that the person who is in need is, number one, identified, and that's why I have the screening for those defendants in the jail, as well as for victims. And then they're provided information and connection up to both financial coverage for the medical or health services, transportation to the place where those services are provided, and connectivity to an appropriate agency that can provide the services. And we're very fortunate to have that, so that's helped us a lot. The results that we've experienced so far, this is a little outdated, it's a couple of months old, but you can see in this graph that December 2016, this was the monthly report. We have 2,372 bookings at our jail. When we started this project, our average daily population at the jail was about 2,200, and capacity is 2,377. So fortunately we have, if you look down at the bottom, we also have 2,469 released. We're actually releasing more inmates than are coming into the jail, and we've reduced average daily population to 1,802. It's actually down since December, and it's now a little 1,775 and continues to go down. We'll also see our continuing challenge, which is that we continue to evidence racial and ethnic disparities. So the 2015 U.S. Census, African Americans are 4.1% of the population in Pima County, but in jail, African Americans are 11.73% of the population. If you look at Hispanics, again, the census shows 36.4% of the Pima County population, but in the jail population has 46.78% Hispanics. This is our biggest challenge. Part of what we're going to be working on through the leadership, the conference, and our other initiatives with the community collaborative is to try to figure out how we can remedy those racial and ethnic disparities. Here's some information about how you can get more details about what we're doing than could be provided here. We have a website, we have a Facebook page, a Twitter account, and Flickr. You can get the whole history of how we started what we're doing and the details of what we're doing, and follow the statistics as we go forward.
Thank you. That was a fantastic presentation. We're going to take most of our questions at the end, but if there's any burning questions, because Amelia just covered a lot of information, I'm going to give folks just 1 or 2 minutes to go ahead and ask a question. But we're going to cut off at 1 or 2 questions and then reserve most of the questions for the end. Here, what type of automated contact system are you using for defendants?
Well, I am not a technician, so I can't go into the details of that, but it's called IVR, and you'll be able to get more information on that through the website, and my email address will be circulated, and I'd be happy to track it down for whoever's looking for it.
Okay, another question. Based on the learning so far, what's the greatest need going forward to strengthen the existing initiatives/programs?
It's always the greatest need. So, you know, money for personnel. One of our big issues we've determined is transportation to and from the jail for people, to expand the technology used for electronic monitoring and the personnel associated with. So we need funding in order to make that happen. And our county is a very poor county. Tucson's a very poor city. So we're going to be able to do it without additional grant funds from MacArthur or some other source.
More question, and then we're going to move on to the questions later. But the sheriff from Ferguson recently discussed the difference between bias and disparity. Do you have any thoughts on that concerning how you conduct your research? And this is Lewis, because Ferguson is in their jurisdiction.
I went to St. Louis along with our Tucson police chief, and this is one of the topics that was discussed there with the Department of Justice and Bureau of Justice assistants. It's a really good question. It's that our consultants and technical service providers have been assisting us with in Pima County. I'll tell you a really interesting fact about the data that we found. The MacArthur Foundation asked us to look at 7 different intercepts where decisions are made as to whether or not a defendant would be taken into custody or retained in custody for field actions with law enforcement, whether there's a custodial arrest, at the level of a court appearance, whether they're released pre-trial, going through the entire criminal justice system. Found only 1 point where there's not any racial or ethnic disparity in the numbers, and that was at the felony charging decision in my office. Now, I won't say that we have less implicit bias than anybody else, but I'll tell you what the county attorney and I and others have attributed that to possibly. That's the only point in the criminal justice system where the person who's making the decision is not looking at the defendant, having any contact with the defendant. A prosecutor talking to a detective, and they're looking at the evidence of the case. They're not looking at the defendant. So they don't know, the prosecutor isn't even aware of what the race or ethnicity of that defendant is. The prosecutor, he or she, is just getting evidence from the detective and making that decision. At every other point, all 6 other points, there's interaction between the defendant and the decision maker. So we think that there may be implicit bias in the system that is causing some of these disparities, and that's one of the things we're doing training on implicit bias.
Super interesting. We're going to move on now to our friends in St. Louis County. Person and Amy I'm getting wrong, Sutnick.
Sutnick.
Okay, good. Okay.
Close enough.
Okay. You guys go on with your presentation, and then we'll take questions for both afterwards.
Very thank you, Mai, and I'm Herb Bernson, Director for Justice Services in St. Louis County, and
I'm Amy Sutnick, Community Support Specialist and Re-Entry Coordinator for the MacArthur Foundation at Queen of Peace Center.
To give you a little information, we are a separate county from the city of St. Louis, really an adjoining county. We also have about approximately a population of 1 million. There are about 2 municipalities within St. Louis County, so that gives several challenges just by itself in terms of all different jurisdictions. Any state charges, of course, within St. Louis County would adhere to the St. Louis County Jail. Ferguson, as I have said, is one of the municipalities within St. Louis County. Approximately 24,000 individuals, and that is a significant decrease in terms of bookings over previous years, and it coincides with some reforms that have been put in place by the state and by the county as far as reform within the courts, especially the municipal courts. In addition to the individuals booked, we have admitted to the jail approximately 9,317, and our average daily population last year is 1,219. Justice Challenge, it is important to talk about this particular implementation of our grant, which is supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, as Soledad has outlined. The strategy we have as for planning purposes is, first of all, key purpose is to reduce, as stated already, the over-reliance on incarceration. Spend a person with substance abuse and mental illness while reducing racial and ethnic disparities. Substance and mental illness are very within the jail, and it is a very good target for all of us to keep in mind as we try and implement these strategies of reduction. Our target population in St. Louis County Jail, in order to achieve this goal, is between 15 and 19% of recent daily population over a period of 2 years. So this is our goal. And I put 2 of the main ones on listed. In order to achieve this goal is to, first of all, expand our pretrial release program. We have a pretrial release program in effect, but the MacArthur Foundation will enable us to do is to focus on individuals who's significant, especially in regard to mental illness and substance abuse, that they weren't seen as an acceptable risk to be released. They're just too significant in ways to release them back into the community. So expanding that is we've been able to do through this MacArthur grant, and I'll start doing that as we go further. Second, implement what's called a right docket for individuals detained for technical probation violators. We found in the data, and data is a very important part of this entire initiative, about who is incarcerated in our jail and for how long. The 2 primary drivers of St. Louis County jail population are release detention and probation violators. And more about probation violators, we have found that many of those individuals are arrested for technical violations. In other words, not additional offenses, but offenses such as absconding from probation. And a lot of that behavior can be treated again to factors such as substance abuse, mental illness, and homelessness. So we focused our strategies on how do we address that and how do we safely individuals back into the community. Some of the primary providers that MacArthur Foundation has enabled us to utilize by increased funding, and some excellent providers, and they are a significant part of our success, certainly since we implemented this strategy in August of 2016. Which is a substance abuse counseling center for both inpatient and outpatient counseling, which has a lot of expertise, not just in mental illness, but also in providing for individuals who are homeless. The transition, and I wanted to say also that individuals that we have found of treatment are women, and so we've concentrated trying to ensure that we provide service for them. One of the agencies that we're using is Center for Women in Transition, which really concentrates on providing treatment, substance abuse, and so mentoring and housing. And Queen of Peace Center, which Amy will explain, but they are have a lot of expertise in helping women and dealing with trauma and other type of offenses and needs. The Father Support Center. We really have discovered again in this data that individuals who we have incarcerated are incarcerated for non-payment of child support, and that's a significant offense, and certainly child support has a lot of repercussions in the community with mothers and children. But being in jail, we know is not necessarily going to solve that problem. So we're concentrating on and have concentrated on how to address that. And one of the things that we've done, working very closely with the prosecuting attorney's office and the courts, is to have a program, non-support reentry, that we call it, where we safely recommend releases back into the community, whether or not the individuals are on a pretrial or whether or not they are on a sentence situation or under probation violation status. Get back into the community, get their needs addressed, get them working, and get funds back to them and their children. So that's what we are doing, and we really are encouraged by the success, and Father Support Center is one of those agencies that are extremely helpful as far as that initiative. 2016, there have been 405 releases from the county jail associated with this work. You can see the numbers there, how many: 122 electronic home detention, non-reentry for child support offenses, expanded pretrial release, and violations. As far as probation violations, that area that we did see some racial disparities. We saw that individuals were averaging on technical probation violations in jail for an average of approximately 99 days. Our initiative goal is to with a statement to the court within 10 days of arrest, and we've been successful with that. Within 2 weeks, release those individuals, reinstating their probation, but with conditions, and those conditions are very specific in terms of their needs: substance abuse, mental illness, homelessness, and they are followed by the case managers that we hear associated with the MacArthur grant. They're followed by the providers and the case management staff there. They're followed by probation officers. So meet their needs and get them on the path to success. For the 142 individuals of that 405 that we have released directly to these agencies. I emphasize again, as Amelia did, that this is the challenge grant. We are releasing individuals who we believe are not a threat to the community. They are nonviolent offenses, but needs are high. And by releasing them, getting them treatment, we really believe that we are making the communities safer for anyone concerned. Bridgewood, we've released 58 individuals to them, substance abuse. Provident, 10. Some individuals with mental illness and homelessness, especially. Center for Women in Transition, those 142. Queens, 20. Father Support Center, we have one there right now. Other supplemental providers, 21. And supplemental providers, we have learned that there are many agencies that, even though we are not providing direct funding, they are significantly making contributions to assist us, and these are just some of the agencies right there that are doing that. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to Amy Sukenik of the Queen of Peace Center. Amy?
So my name is Amy Sukenik, as Herb just said. Thank you for introducing me. I am a community support specialist and re-entry coordinator for the MacArthur Foundation at Queen of Peace Center, a nonprofit Catholic charity under the St. Louis Archdiocese. Queen is a family-centered behavioral health care provider for with addiction, their children, and their families. The center provides a variety of treatment options for substance use, including a gender-specific recovery program for women and children, such as group classes and education, a counselor, and a community support specialist for each individual, the mom and the child. Daycare for their children, an early childhood development center, permanent transitional housing for women and their families, an intervention and prevention program for adolescents. At Queen, understand that addiction impacts the entire family. Not just the woman or mom or sister or daughter need to be able to recover from their addiction, but so does the family. The Queen of Peace Center offers family counseling, child counseling, women's counseling, etc., in order for them to begin the healing process as a family unit and on with their lives together. My community support specialist assists the clients with housing, employment, health insurance, education, food stamps, disability, the list goes on. My role as a MacArthur Reentry Coordinator also includes all of that support, but specifically to MacArthur clients. I attend weekly meetings at the jail with the MacArthur caseworkers and the other providers that are similar to Queen of Peace Center in the community, the ones that Herb just mentioned earlier on. He and I are in contact on a daily basis in regard to the MacArthur client's progress. However, one of the MacArthur caseworkers will call me stating they have a potential client that needs to be interviewed. The jail interview the client and decide whether or not they meet the criteria to seek treatment at Queen of Peace Center. The criteria are pretty easy. You need to have a Missouri state ID and a substance use addiction problem. Beneficial outcomes of the MacArthur Foundation is the sharing relationship amongst the providers under MacArthur. Before working with the MacArthur Foundation, I have organizations such as Center for Women in Transition, Provident, Employment Connections, and other ones that Herb mentioned, but I had the opportunity to work with them. Queen of Peace Center reaches out to these other providers for additional support, resources we may not always have access to, but the other providers do. Phenomenal mental health program. Employment Connections offers job training classes and access to housing. Center Transition has a good relationship with family care centers, and so are all resources that are used by Queen of Peace Center now that may not have been available to us before. Not clients benefit from this relationship, but other clients at Queen of Peace Center not under the MacArthur program do as well. The government has enabled its St. Louis providers to an abundance of much-needed resources to clients because of this collaboration. Well, about my job at Queen of Peace Center, one of the questions is, how do these women get addicted to substance use? There's no answer. As we know, addiction can be genetic. It can occur after surgeries because clients become addicted to pain medication. However, I feel that the most common reason my clients at Queen of Peace Center suffer from addiction is due to past trauma. Of my clients suffer from PTSD, intense grief from a loved one's death, and most upsettingly, many of my clients have been victims of severe sexual assault. These women have access to psychiatric help or counseling prior to their addiction. They tried alcohol because it was the only available coping mechanism they could afford. And we have a psychiatrist on site every Wednesday. Couple clients, community support specialists, and the client's counselor. Our clients are finally getting the mental health assistance they desperately needed before their addiction took place. A physician who comes twice a week to provide medical assistant treatment to recovery, such as Oxen and the Vivitrol shot. The Vivitrol shot is also offered at the jail before I receive the client. At Queen, we don't want to just get our clients clean. We want women, families, and heal hearts. So I have two clients. One client, I called from a caseworker at MacArthur and interviewed this woman. And she was addicted to heroin for the past 10 years. That's a huge chunk of time, and you know that could seem really nerve-wracking for someone to try to even recover from that length of time on a drug. But we put her in patient treatment program at Queen of Peace Center for 21 days, and she did it successfully, even though she had to miss holidays with her family and was allowed to have visitors during that time. She did patient for 5 days a week from 9 to 4 p.m. Then level 2, where you only are required to go 3 days a week. And she's level, and she's also assistant manager at a retail store, and also in school at a community college, and she hopes to be in the medical field someday. This client had mental health issues that have finally been addressed due to the on-site psychiatrist. And addicted to heroin as well. She's and has missed several birthdays. Not she was in jail, sometimes because she was in jail, but she's missed birthdays, she's missed significant events for her child, but now is able to be there for him. On the bus to go to school, she can leave at the same time to go to treatment. She's now able to help her son with homework, talk to him about his day, and just be there the way a mom should be. She also has mental health issues, now under control because of those psychiatrists. The main reason that these women in the MacArthur Foundation are succeeding is because they find out the support, not just from Queen of Peace Center, but because of the MacArthur case managers and the financial resources from the MacArthur Foundation. And
A little bit of technical difficulties. Amy, thank you very much for your presentation. And Soledad, are you still on the line?
Here.
And Amelia, are you still on the line? Great. We're now open to take questions from everybody who's been on this webinar. So we take questions probably another 20 minutes. So please go ahead and type in your questions. There's already some coming through. Wait. Second. I'm not sure what panelist it was, but she stated that there is a lot of poverty in Tucson. Did I hear correctly? In Tucson area, there are more jail population disparities with Hispanics and Native Americans as opposed to Americans in St. Louis. I think the question is, where are the largest disparities in Tucson and where are the largest disparities in St. Louis?
So this is Amelia Kramer, and I'm from Pima County, Arizona, which is, Tucson is the biggest city in Pima County. It's the second largest city in the state of Arizona. It's in the top 15 cities nationally for poverty level, and also we have a much higher population of severely mentally ill than is proportionate to our population. We see racial and ethnic disparities in our jail, including Latinos or Hispanics, depending on where your cultural sensitivity is in terms of those terms. The term Hispanic is the preferred term here in Arizona. We also see the great disparities for African Americans, although that is a small percentage of our population. The disparity is significant. I see a slight disparity among Native Americans, and as I mentioned, we have two local in Pima County. We've seen some significant improvement where that disparity has been almost eliminated in the jail population. Surprisingly, we see an underrepresentation of Asian Americans one hypothesis is that if you look at income disparities in the United States, you will see the highest income is among Asian Americans, then Caucasian, it's going down, and you reverse that and look at the exact opposite, that's our jail population. So we have the low income, we have the highest racial disparity in our jail, and that may be one of the factors.
Thank you. Want to talk about the disparity in St. Louis?
There are pockets of poverty in St. Louis County that are more predominant, and those especially right now are in the North County area, including areas close to Ferguson. Jail itself, we have approximately, I would say, 6% African American of the population. As I mentioned before, racial disparities that we did discover is, the individuals being held for technical probation violations are incarcerated approximately 10 days longer than other races, and so that area that we, with that knowledge, has certainly gone forward, and as maybe stated before, having strategies applied across the board, regardless of any kind of racial indication or ethnic indication, really can do a lot to maintain that, and that's what we are starting to see.
Okay, we have the first speaker indicated that the participants are on EM/GPS monitors, and they could be scooped up at a moment's notice. Does this mean that your GPS is monitored live 24/7, not on a data pull and analyzed days or weeks later? Who scoops them up? Any questions for you?
Them up?
Yeah, is there a 24/7 monitoring of the system, or is it a data pull that's analyzed days later?
Oh, yeah, electronic monitoring is monitored 24/7, and it is monitored by corrections personnel at the jail. The jail is run by our Pima County Sheriff's Department, which has jurisdiction county-wide. Typically, the Sheriff's Department has sent out sheriff's deputies to scoop up individuals who are in violation of the terms and conditions of their release. However, the option to contact the appropriate law enforcement agency in a municipal jurisdiction and ask them to do the pickup if that's more convenient for both agencies, but mostly in the Sheriff's Department. Sometimes we're able to obtain compliance through the two-way radio. For example, there was an inmate who was out on electronic monitoring release, at a work site where he was supposed to be, started walking towards a Circle K, a convenience store where he was not supposed to be. The monitor was able to communicate with him through the two-way radio and say, where are you going, what are you doing, you're not allowed to go that way. And he said, my bad, and turned around and went the other way. And so they did not go and scoop him up at that point. But that's the type of technology that they have. And obviously it's very personnel intensive to conduct monitoring 24/7, and so it's expensive, and that's why we've been able to expand beyond a small pilot group at this point.
Thank you. Will the PowerPoint for this webinar be provided to attendees? Yes, it will be posted on the National Center's website after the webinar is over, so you can obtain all the information on it.
We'll be emailing it out to all the attendees. It's a couple of days, but we're sending it out to everybody.
Thank you. Okay. We don't have more questions come in. I'm going to give it a little bit more time in case folks have other questions or insights into what was discussed. Oh, we just got a new one.
I do see a question about the disparity among African Americans. Do you want to answer that one?
Sure. We thought we sort of did, but if you want to give a little bit more insight, that's fine.
So, like, why are there more like whether a majority of African Americans in the jail, or like what gets them to the jail, kind of thing.
Interested in both.
Okay. Based on my education, you know, the reason people commit crimes or are driven to commit crimes are usually because of the geographical location they might have grown up, the poverty they might have suffered as children, a less stable education, and lack of family stability. And here in St. Louis, although a diverse population, we are still segregated, and in those segregated areas, unfortunately, African Americans do not have excellent access to public school districts. You know, there's definitely a difference in what type of area they live in. It's poorer, and it doesn't have the resources that other areas in St. Louis have to offer, and the kind of neighborhood community aspects as the other communities in St. Louis. So those are usually the ground factors that drive people to commit crime, and it could explain part of the reason. Also, you know, we're not going to hide from the fact that there are sometimes racial biases and that result in a higher disparity between African Americans and whites in the jail.
The question is also for you. I have a question for the woman who spoke from St. Louis. If you identify women who have been victims of domestic violence or sexual assault, do you work with other service providers to address the trauma concerns? If so, how do you coordinate with these other with the services?
So we have several, actually a vast majority of our women have been in abusive relationships, whether it's a boyfriend or a husband. And we have, like I said, we have counselors that work with our community support specialists. So I do like the housing aspect of employment. The counselor walks through the trauma with that client. And then also we have specific groups that these clients would attend. They have a trauma group that they would go to twice a week, to others, and try to go through it and move on from that trauma. And then we have our psychiatrist on Wednesdays that helps with the PTSD that they might have suffered through that domestic abuse.
Great. Thank you. This one's for you. Do the automated call, text, email reminders about court dates go to victims as well as defendants?
A question, no, they do not. And the reason for that is that there are different agencies responsible for the contacts with victims and with defendants. Victim notification for pending court cases is the responsibility of the prosecutor's office, so my office provides victim notification. We do in multiple forms, and we do it both by hard copy letter as well as by email and telephone. We make sure we make a personal contact. The IVR, the interactive voice response that's being used by the courts to contact defendants, is an automated system, and there's not any live connection made.
This is also for you. Percentage of defendants released from jail in Tucson utilize the service beds and mental health services.
That's a question. I don't have the answer. I will tell you that if we're talking pretrial release, which is the focus of the MacArthur grant, we don't yet have those. There is a 46% of the population in the jails in need of some services, either inpatient or outpatient, and the ones who are being released are receiving those services, but I just don't have the current data. I know for defendants post-judge that we have a drug and mental health court and a drug treatment alternative to prison program, and 100% of the participants in those programs, which are operated by the court and the probation department, with from our office, indigent defense, and community service providers, 100% of them are receiving services.
This is for both counties. What is the program doing in the communities you identify as having racial and ethnic disparities to introduce crime prevention techniques?
So, Pima County Attorney's Office, our office in particular, the crime prevention is not one of the MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge strategies that's being employed as part of that program, but our office has crime prevention strategies that deal with both juveniles and adults. We focus mainly on juveniles. We think we've been extremely successful using racketeering funds to give funding to crime prevention organizations, particularly those that serve at-risk youth. We've had a decline in the last decade of our juvenile detention population and of our charges against juveniles. We went from a 400-bed full-capacity juvenile detention facility to an average of about 35 in the facility per day, and we have more than 50% reduction in juvenile crime, and we think that may have been contributing to a reduction in adult crime as well. We also have another crime prevention strategy, which is that we use anti-racketeering funds to purchase gun locks, and we put them at pediatricians' offices and around community fairs and throughout the community in an effort to reduce accidental shootings and domestic violence shootings and those sorts of things. So a few other crime prevention programs in our office, but the Safety and Justice Challenge is not focused on that issue.
Herbert?
In St. Louis County, I mean, we also are fortunate through some HUD funding to be part of a promise zone. And our specific areas, especially in North County, that are really coming together and with community involvement to address, employment, crime, mortality rates, numbers of vacant lots, abandoned buildings, homelessness. Our community and not just one aspect of it, but effort to get together to address these issues. As mentioned several here in this presentation, there are benefits in collaboration that has been initiated by the funding MacArthur, get together and address issues currently can lead to solutions, and plenty of examples of it. I mean, mental health court, for example, we are about ready to start a pilot on a felony basis for the first time, all due to the collaboration that started within the criminal justice system and within community providers and citizens as a result of this MacArthur grant. The police have a UCAN meeting for community action network that they have started monthly with community members just to address concerns and get police involved. We have hosted that ourselves, and our initiatives here to get the word out and get the community involved in assisting us in implementing these strategies. So that is also an example that's been helpful.
We have a note that says the Office of Crime Justice considers victim impact training as a practice. Are the agencies collaborating with victim service providers to provide such services? Do you consider victim impact training any impact in reducing crime?
Absolutely. For example, we have had a victim impact panel in Louis County in which victims come and talk to individuals, perpetrators of offenses, and talk about their own victims or their families being victims, and the impact that we see there among perpetrated crime, I would say continues to be significant. So very important that we involve victims to that extent and get more ideas to do so in the future.
We also have victim impact panels in Pima County, and our restorative justice programs, both for juveniles and adults, in which provide diversion from prosecution for low-level nonviolent crimes, involve victim impact. There has to be apology and restitution to the victim, and there has to be some sort of communication directly if the victim wishes it.
Great. Okay. Some cities are the arrest by officers tracked in order to get an idea of racial profiling or higher arrests of racial or ethnic groups. These behaviors be decreased with training. Yeah.
Well, one of the key things that the MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge is requiring is data collection by the various local law enforcement agencies, as well as implicit bias training, so the answer is yes.
Also, that tracking is done on a regular basis by police agencies here in this region. I also wanted to mention that the University of Missouri St. Louis has been a partner from the very beginning with our team as far as an implementation team as far as MacArthur grant, and they have extensive research and continue to do so in regard to tracking arrest and racial disparities and so forth. So we're learning from them also.
Thank you, both of you. Okay, here's a good one. That all arrests were great, but this is going to be an interesting conversation. How do we communicate to victims that a non-traditional response to crime or probation is violation is in the system buying into manipulative or non-compliant behaviors on the part of the defendant?
Good question, and that one's come up in the Pima County Collaborative as well as the core group. And that's the reason why the probation department and law enforcement is involved in a case-by-case analysis, because we find that there is an effort of manipulation, particularly in victim-related crimes, then that's something that's taken into consideration. A lot of the technical violations that we're seeing involve that do not involve victims. So we have a significant number of low-level felony drug possession cases. Defendants are now being released pretrial. If they are addicts, even if they're in treatment, they often violate the condition of probation that says they're not to use drugs. And what we do is try to enhance interventions at that point if we believe that they're basically trying to cooperate with treatment. In other words, they're showing up for their appointments, they're drawing urines, they're being honest, they're appearing for court appearances, but they are struggling with sobriety. So that's the type of violation where we might allow someone to remain out of custody if, for example, they go into a residential treatment facility rather than into the jail, but that's a non-victim crime. And we find that most ones in which probation is not engaging in an arrest is non-victim crimes for that reason.
And I would add that, screening tools that are evidence-based is a way to ensure that individuals' needs are being identified, and also that we're providing, the for individuals, because there's always going to be attempts for manipulation. There's always going to be individuals that just want to say what you want them to hear, but with based practice screening tools, with the professionals in terms of their screening and these different agencies, and they can cut down on that. I think admissibility from the individuals is also important. Tuition where appropriate be provided, where individuals, if they're being released on child support cases, they immediately get involved in addressing problems, getting employment, and paying back what is owed, or start to pay back what is owed to them. I think regular drug testing is sometimes certainly a part of, and oftentimes part of, the responsibility that individuals must demonstrate to be successful.
When all the providers and the caseworkers under MacArthur are working together and are in communication with one another, we're much more able to understand what the client is doing. If they are trying to just get to jail and not really do a substance use treatment program, we do that right away, and it's dealt with. They're told that this is their second chance. This is how you can start your new life. You don't want it, then that's it. But we are sure that our clients are doing the very best that they can.
We're out of time now for any more questions. Actually, I don't think we have any more questions. I want to thank you all. everyone who's been on this call, all the listeners for tuning in. I also want to give a thanks to Soledad and to Amelia, Herb, and Amy for doing such great presentations, and most of all, for doing such great work. And overall, just a big thank you to the MacArthur Foundation for being so innovative and supportive and really trying to bring about this great change. As we said, we will be emailing out the presentations to anybody who's up for the webinar, and it will also be posted on our webpage. Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.